Hey noble ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking, and it is a pleasure to have you here today to talk a bit more about the Netflix movie The King, based on the Shakespearean interpretation of the life of Henry V, King of England. Now, the reason why I say talk more is because I've already made a video review of the trailer, so if you haven't checked it out, it serves as a good introduction to this video. But now, having watched the whole film, there are a lot of things I have to say. So on this video, we're going to talk about the weapons, armor, the combat, and a little bit about the overall quality of the movie. And I'll tell you in a minute why I think these two things are intertwined. What we will not talk about on this video is the battle per se. I will mention a couple of things, but I will make a fully dedicated video on how they represented the Battle of Agincourt, hopefully having some special guests. You will see. Okay, so I'd like to start by saying this. As a movie, The King on Netflix is an excellent production in terms of the quality of entertainment, and let's not forget that that's what a movie is supposed to do. This is, as many people have pointed out, this is not a historical documentary. It is a movie based on the Shakespeare play based on a historical character and historical events. So it is important to keep in mind that yes, the movie is not good from an educational standpoint because it teaches you some things that are completely historically wrong. So does this movie have any educational value? Historical educational value? No. Is it supposed to have any? Well, it doesn't really matter. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is because I am about to completely destroy this movie in terms of the props, so the sort of armor that they have used, because that is awful. But I felt that it was important to at least first defend it, because I noticed that there has been a lot of debates going on at the moment on the Facebook groups on historical education and historical reenactment groups. And I noticed a lot of people, of course, getting mad at the movie makers because of the lack of quality of the armor used, and believe me, I will prove it to you, but it is really bad. I mean, the Outlaw King did a much better job, and I have made a full review of the Outlaw King armor and weapons, and I found flaws, quite a lot of big flaws on that as well, but it was a much better approximation as to what real medieval armor would have looked than what the King has done. What the King has done is really bad. However, I noticed that a lot of people who are armor and weapons enthusiasts like me got carried away too much, and they started saying that the whole movie is awful and the movie production is disgusting, and that is not fair, because the talent of the actors, particularly the actor who played the King, but generally speaking, I want to say most of the actors in this show, the talent is outstanding. Did the movie entertain me? Absolutely. Did I enjoy the 2 hours I spent watching the movie? Absolutely. And that is very important to say. In terms of quality, the movie creates a very entertaining, emotionally committing plot that is fun to watch, and the combat scenes, and I'm gonna talk about those technically in a moment, but generally speaking, the whole feelings of character progression and character development and personality change of Henry V and the people around him, it really was processed excellently well. The photography in the film is fantastic. It's not right to call a film an awful movie just because the armor is awful. So yes, I am here to debunk the film and show you that real historical armor is order of magnitude much better than what they show in the film, but still, I'm gonna do it fair. So before we start talking about the armor, I'd like to talk about the weapons, and this is one of the good things that the film did. We don't have the usual Hollywood trope where you see people with swords slicing through plate armor like it was batter. Finally, that's not happening, and this we need to say. I mean, we have been combating this idea of you can cut through plate armor like it was nothing with your sword that has been going on in the last 20 years, maybe even 50 years of movie production, and finally the King brings in warhammers, actually historically proportioned, maces and blunt weapons used against people in full plate armor because you can't cut through plate, and it's something that needs to be commended. Let's not be exceptionally aggressive towards the movie, because they did something right here. There is not one single scene in the movie where you see someone with a sword that cuts through plate armor. It just doesn't happen. What happens, as I say, you see people smashing other people. You see, I actually loved it how during the combat you see people in full plate armor utilizing their bare steel fists against other people in armor, and it's cool. It looks great. And you also see people using rondels and using daggers to stab rub in the eye slits or the parts of the armor that are weak spots because they only have mail, and so they don't actually go and pierce plate armor. Guys, this is fantastic. So that's something that it means that finally filmmakers are starting to realize that yes, full plate armor was exceptionally effective, and therefore you need to show how two knights would have fought, and two knights wouldn't have tried to slash each other with blades, because it just doesn't happen. Unfortunately, the myth of arrows penetrating plate is still present, and the arrow department, the archery in the movie was done really bad. So that's one of the things that I really hated, and as I said, I was going to touch upon a little bit about the Battle of Agincourt, although I will make a fully dedicated video inviting professional experts here to review it with me. But one of the things that we know was done wrong in the movie is, again, this volley fire that we know most academics, most historians, professionals tell us, to quote one Tobias Capwell, it did not happen. This idea of you shoot the arrow in the air and then the air goes up and then plops down and falls down as a rain. This is what Laurence Olivier did in his movie. This is what you see in Lord of the Rings, and it has become a trope in Crusader films all over the place. And yet we know, if we look at the historical manuscripts and the historical eyewitness accounts, we know that it did not happen. Archers during the Battle of Agincourt shot direct fire. Sorry if I used the word fire improperly. They shot direct fire, not rains of arrows, and they shot a point blank most of the time, exception being maybe the very beginning of the battle. But during the entirety of the battle, we know that they shot, and they shot a lot. Again, another thing that they failed to show. They just show, in the whole battle, they just show a couple of volleys of rains of arrows, and that's it. It doesn't do justice to the importance of the longbow in the battle. And although the longbow arrows did not penetrate plate, still having so many arrows shot into you throughout the entirety of the battle would have been a devastating problem to deal with. Even if the arrows don't penetrate the plate, even if the arrows don't kill you as a fully armed knight, still it's gonna be painful, it's gonna be loud, it's gonna be tough to deal with. And we know, again, from historical accounts, the knights were concerned that the arrows could penetrate their eye slits, that the arrows could penetrate the weak spots, like for example the side of the visors. So no knight was concerned that the arrows could penetrate the breastplate. Instead, in the movie, unfortunately, it does happen. One of the reasons why volley fire does not work, and again, I've even seen people telling me that it's not true that Dr. Capwell said that sort of arrows raining didn't happen. He did say it. I will leave links in the description below so you can see it by yourself. Dr. Capwell said it a million times that did not happen in the Battle of Agincourt. But the reason why it doesn't work, just think of it this way. When you shoot the arrow high in the air, because you want the arrow to hit an opponent who is really far away and raining on this opponent, what you're doing is that you have the arrow. First, you're shooting at maximum range. This already diminishes the penetrative power of the arrow. If you shoot a point blank, the arrow has more power. Secondly, you actually lose most of the power, because when the arrow is going up in the air, it is going against gravity. So by the time it reaches the point of culmination and it starts falling, it has mostly lost a lot of the power that the bow has generated. And the power that now the arrow is gonna use is its own weight as it's falling down. Is that going to be enough to penetrate and kill? Well, I'm gonna say absolutely not, particularly because the most statistically probable targets is going to be the top of the helmet, or maybe the pointy visor. These are optimized to resist arrow fire. The thick bulks of the steel helmets were exactly designed to stop weapons. So if you try and hit it with a mace, if you try and hit it with a sword, or if an arrow happens to come and hit you in the face, you have the muzzle of the hound skull, you have the sugar loaf in your helmet, and these will encourage any blow, weapon or point, including an arrow, to be deflected, to not find a flat surface where the entirety of the energy would be expressed, but you find a pointy surface, and therefore the majority of that energy will be dispersed. Also, the top of the helmet was one of the thickest areas of the armor. So, not only we have an arrow that has lost most of its power generated by the bow, not only we have an arrow that is really far away, so again losing more power, but we have an arrow that is using merely its weight. And yes, these arrows of the Battle of Agincourt were rather, they weren't very thin arrows, but this weight alone is not going to be enough to do anything against top of the helmets, breastplates and whatnot. And is it gonna be enough to penetrate the tough skin and covering, and in some cases armor of horses? Again, I doubt it severely. I mean, think about it. Take an arrow and drop it from the 5th floor of a building. I don't think it's gonna have nearly the same power as shooting the arrow directly at a target at point blank. Henry is a warrior king. Does he consider archery important? I wanna say yes. He's got 7,000 archers in here and 1,500 men-at-arms. Does he have an unlimited amount of arrows? No. The number is finite. So wasting so many arrows and ammunition that he had produced and paid for at super far distance, hoping that they will hit somewhere where they could penetrate regardless of the fact that they don't even have enough power to do it, is nonsensical. He would have wanted each single shot to count. So put as many valuable shots, aimed shots, not random, hoping that they would hit somewhere. Because again, English longbowmen were very good at aiming. These are professionals that practiced all the time with targets. Why do you even bother practicing with targets if all you do is volley fire? No, these people were optimized at actually shooting a point blank, full power, and aiming at specific areas of the body of their opponents so that as many shots as possible would count, and then it becomes a numbers game. Moving on to the knights. Why are they charging with swords? Why are they not using lances? Big problem. So moving on to the armor, and then we will finish talking a little bit about the combat. The armor has problems. It looks like a mixture of 16th century stuff, 14th century stuff and fantasy. This is what the armor looks like. I have seen people saying, now the history buffs are going to complain about minute details that mean nothing, and they will say that the armor is rubbish. No, we are not talking about minute, they are huge. I mean, the armor of the Prince of France, the Dauphin, is ridiculous. That is perfect for Game of Thrones, or Lord of the Rings, or Dungeons and Dragons. There is nothing that looks like that in the historical record, and we know exactly what early 15th century armor looked like. Because remember, we are in 1415, it's a specific date. We know exactly what the armor looked like, and a lot of people mentioned the armor in the previous movie that we had immediately after World War II, made again by Laurence Olivier, but it definitely was more historically accurate than this. The helmets look awful, and the mail coifs, and this is again a massive problem. Mail coifs are too big, they are worn without padding, they don't cover the throat, they don't cover enough. And if you compare it with real examples, you can see that the difference is humongous. And they just look like lob stuff made by, I don't know, cheap Indian manufacturers who don't have a clue what the historical thing looks like. And to be honest, I know that people complain saying, well, but the movie had a certain budget. Okay, but this armor had a cost. It's not like they got it for free. And I'm not saying supply perfect armor to all characters, but at least make good reenactor level armor for the protagonist, for the king and his closest men and the Prince of France. I am sure they have that budget, like I'm 200% sure they have that budget, and then use cheap armor for the rest of the people. Although again, even better, pay a historical reenactment group and get super perfect armor for the majority. You can get 100 people wearing perfect armor because there are reenactment groups. And to be honest, I think most reenactors would jump at the opportunity to wear their armor for a movie, and they would even do it for free. So you are actually saving on the movie budget if you use reenactors. Like literally, you're saving. And even if they want to be paid, you are basically renting them. You're not, you have to pay extras anyways. You can pay people to be extras and they bring in their own armor. So you pay the exact same amount of money you would have paid extras to do your scenes in the movie or to just stand there to be cool. And you don't have to supply armor because they've got their own. Guys, it makes absolutely zero sense to say, oh, it's a movie, they have a limited budget. You can get perfect armor at a lower budget than this fantasy stuff that they have that makes the movie look really bad. Now, is it a need? Is it an absolute necessity for a movie to have historically accurate armor? No, but historically accurate armor looks better, works better. Costume armor makes you more bulky, it makes you clumsy. As you can see, sometimes, unfortunately, you can tell that these actors, not only they're not trained in armor combat, they are extremely encumbered by this armor because it's not functional, because it's not properly proportioned. And when you see people who actually train in armor and they have proper suits of armor, like again Dr. Tobias Capwell, and you see the way they move, you know, it takes away from the experience. Real armor looks amazing, works amazing, it's just plus 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 plus. It's a win-win. There is no reason whatsoever not to use real armor, and it's going to be a perfect representation, and it looks better. So I could have understood if the fantasy armor or this whatever cheap armor that they came up with looked better. Then I can understand. It's like, you know, fantasy armor looks actually better in the movie, but since it doesn't, because it looks stupid, it looks clumsy, it looks like it doesn't work, then, you know, might as well get the real deal, because it will also increase the value of the movie, and that's when the movie can become an educational thing. So maybe you can say that they have to change the plot because they want to make it engaging for the audience. I can understand that to a certain point, to a certain extent. Of course, don't put dragons in a Henry V movie, but to a certain extent I can excuse some plot twists because you want to make it more interesting for the people, because at the end of the day, again, it's based on a play. It's based on Shakespeare's interpretations on who was good and who was bad and blah blah blah. If the armor is correct, it will have an educational value, even if it wasn't intended to be a documentary. So yes, it's not a documentary, but since there is only to gain from historical armor, I don't understand why not doing it, since they did put effort into creating a more historically accurate combat. And talking about the combat, as I said, I think it's well done because it gives the idea of a less choreographic combat. I mean, there are no pirouettes, and that's an important thing. There are no fancy moves of people starting to do crazy jumps and they look like kung fu movies, which we often see in the video game industry. I mean, Assassin's Creed Odyssey with Spartans fighting like kung fu masters anyone, you know, that was pretty bad. I'm really happy that the combat looks more believable, that these people are struggling to kill a foe who's fully protected in plate, and they need to come up with the craziest way. They wrestle, they use the mud to frigging murder them. Occasionally there are strange things like King Henry punching a full plate armored knight with his hand, which is only covered in mail. That looked a little strange, a little iffy. I think he would have broken his wrist against full plate, but you know, when he does it with plate gauntlets, and I'm like, yes, absolutely, totally. And again, the usage of daggers in hand-to-hand combat, the idea that you need to subdue a knight, it's pretty cool. One last thing I hated about one of the fighting scenes is the scene that actually, of course, didn't happen in real history, but I'll cover that in another video, of the French prince, you know, wanting to fight. At the end, he slips because of the mud, and his knights do nothing. The knights that he's come with, and you can see that he has got knights, they see him on the slippery surface of mud, he falls on the ground 3, 4, 5 times, and his knights don't even give him a hand. They don't dismount, they don't help him to bring him back into a more secure and less slippery area. No, the English king has enough time to just, you know, thrust his weapon on the floor, on the ground. Another thing that you wouldn't do with a real weapon, but anyways, because it damages the tip. But anyways, and he just commands his men to just jump on the French, just slaughter him. But I understand, you know, you want the villain to die, and you want the villain to die in a non-heroic way. I understand that, but still, it's stupid. Then don't show the villain with his knights, because I don't understand why the Knights of France wouldn't help their leader to stand up. But anyways, apart from that, it's a good movie. I enjoyed it. Excellent acting, very good music. Another thing that is important to say, the music was outstanding. It still has some of those problems where we don't see enough bright colors. We still see everything dark and gray, but I think we are moving towards a better representation of the Middle Ages, and I will make another video in the future talking and addressing the battle, and to try and understand exactly what really happened and how bad of a representation of the battle it actually was. But again, good movie, and good on Netflix for trying to get better. Well, I hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please remember thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more content from the Metatron, and if you haven't, become a noble one. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Bye, noble ones.